China is knee-deep in the worst chapter of its tryst with COVID-19, a disease that it exported to the rest of the world. The world is now asking, what can the rest of the world do, A, to help China, and B, to protect itself from the irresponsible actions of the Chinese government. Here in India, the biggest question being asked at this point of time is, should we immediately ban all flights to and from China? That's the big question we're asking. I'm Shiv Aroor, this is 5 Live, the headlines first. As alarm bells ring over China's COVID surge, Health Minister Mansukh Mandviya urges caution, says COVID is not over yet. India steps up surveillance measures. States asked to track new mutants. Unabated politics over Tawang clash. Opposition stages protest outside Parliament, says want discussion on the India-China December 9th clash on the floor of the House. Enforcement Directorate names K. Kavita, daughter of the Telangana Chief Minister, in the liquor dangal charge sheet. Claims she gave bribes up to 100 crore rupees to an Aam Aadmi Party leader to get a piece of the pie of the Delhi liquor business. BJP attacks Kavita, rubbishes the charges. The Maharashtra-Karnataka border dispute rages on. Bombay government vows to bring assembly out resolution. Sena MP Sanjay Raut says will enter Karnataka without anyone's permission like China entered India. Calls Maharashtra government weak.
वैसे तो उनकी सरकार जो दिल्ली में बैठी है वो भी इंच की भाषा करते हैं कि चाइना को इन चीज भी नहीं देगी, लेकिन चाइना घुस गया है। चाइना हम भी घुसेंगे। घुसने के लिए हमें किसी की परमिशन की जरूरत नहीं है।
Taliban bans university education for women in Afghanistan, the highest level of education most Afghan girls will be able to attain is grade 6, the final year of primary school. Viewer, if you're feeling it, I'm feeling it too. Look at that picture in my background. I thought we'd seen the last of it. Unfortunately, thanks once again to the country that gave us the coronavirus pandemic, we are having to switch our spotlights onto the COVID pandemic once again. You and I, viewer, had hoped that we'd never need to wear a mask again, perhaps, that we didn't have to think of the prospect of banned flights and curtailed international travel, that we didn't have to think of lockdowns and restrictions on our daily lives. But that is the reality. And I'm here to tell you today that the sooner we face that reality and at least prepare in a practical fashion, no need to exaggerate the threat, but important to look it in the eye and realize and remind ourselves that China is a country with which every other country in the world currently has zero trust, especially us here in India. And that's the reason why we cannot believe anything that China is officially saying, especially when pictures tell exactly the opposite story that the Communist Party in China is currently claiming. They're claiming it's not that bad, but the pictures and information coming out from whistleblowers and images suggests it's a nightmare situation. Remember, there are estimates that 1 million Chinese citizens could lose their lives to COVID in the next few months. And this is thanks wholly to China's bungled COVID control policy. Here in India, the most immediate question to us, to civil society, to citizens is, should we protect ourselves? And is the first move in that kind of thing banning all flights to and from China as quickly as possible? Watch this report.
China's worst COVID nightmare once again threatens the world. A runaway rise in infections with over 1 million deaths predicted this year. Here in India, even as the government goes into a huddle to plan ahead for any possible impact, One of the first demands going up is for an immediate flight ban with China.
इस परिस्थिति में मैंने ये मांग की है कि सबसे पहले हमको चीन से जो हवाई जहाज आ रहे हैं या चीन जा रहे हैं उनके ऊपर रोक लगानी चाहिए.
India currently has no direct flights with China, but several flights with stopovers in Hong Kong and countries like Singapore, South Korea and Vietnam. For the moment, there's no change in China-specific flight guidelines.
There is no decision with regard to any change in the aviation guidelines as of now.
Traditional direct flights between the big cities of both countries have been off the table since the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. And while they've always been unlikely to resume anytime soon, China's knee-jerk cancellation of flight routes when even a single passenger tests positive, now the possibility of a total Indian ban could be looming. Before the current Chinese COVID crisis exploded, India and China had been in discussions to resume at least limited direct flights. But that seems a very far cry now. According to a survey done by community social media pollster Local Circle, 87% of Indians surveyed want a total shutdown of all flights, including non-direct flights between India and China. 71% want mandatory quarantine for all passengers who've been to China in the last 2 weeks. Given what India faced thanks to inbound passengers from China in the early days of the pandemic, the nervousness is writ large in large sections of the public wanting blanket bans on flights. The question is, could things reach a pass where the government changes its mind and stops all flights to and from China? Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, let's just tell you a little bit about the history of flights between India and China. India stopped all flights with China in late 2019 when the Wuhan virus first became a big world story. Remember, at this point, since late 2019, there has been not a single direct flight between India and China ever since. Now, India may not resume direct flights with China anytime soon. It was never on the cards for the near foreseeable future. And now with the Chinese COVID crisis, I don't think it's going to happen anytime in the medium term at least. Poulomi Saha, who tracks aviation for India Today, is with me live. She's been breaking all the big stories on the advisories as well as the new protocols that are going to be kicking into place in airports across the country, including random sampling that I'm going to tell you in a moment from now. Poulomi, India and China have no direct flights. They haven't had any direct flights for a long time, since the pandemic began at least. Where do things stand as far as flight ban is concerned? It's a little complicated because these are flights that take passengers from India to places like Hong Kong, Singapore, Vietnam, South Korea, etc. How does it work if a flight ban needs to be imposed?
Well, the advisory will have to come from the Ministry of Health. As you heard Dr. V.K. Paul over there say after that COVID review meeting in Delhi earlier today, it is status quo in terms of putting any sort of restrictions on international arrivals. But you did mention about random sampling, which is to begin at airports, which of course sees international incoming flights. But as far as India-China flights are concerned, like you rightly pointed out, we don't have any direct flights between India and China since the onset of the pandemic. And that's mostly owing to the fact that there are very strict COVID-related restrictions in China, and Beijing had imposed those restrictions. Like we resumed international flights with most countries earlier this year, we wanted to resume flights with China as well. There were many students who study medicine, etc. in China who wanted to go back, and they were obviously petitioning and lobbying the government. We were constantly in negotiations with China as well earlier, but China has certain rules. For instance, they say that we will allow for flights, but if anyone, or in terms of the testing that happens at our airports, tests positive for COVID-19, immediately there will be flight cancellations, and and we will stop flights coming in from your country. Now, India was not very comfortable with that rule because that would be a huge burden on airlines who would have to face that cancellation. And when they're not responsible for the COVID testing, so to say, is to happens as far as the centers which are identified by the Chinese embassy in India
Yes.
is a concern. So because those negotiations were happening, direct flights hadn't resumed. Now with this reoccurrence of the virus and the spread of the virus in China, obviously we'll have a rethink about that. We were looking possibly, Indigo for instance had indicated that they might want to resume flights to certain cities like Guangzhou and Chengdu
Yes.
in March 2023. But given the current scenario, unlikely that those direct flights will resume between India and China, Shiv.
Okay, so direct flights definitely not going to happen anytime soon. And a question remains on whether those indirect, non-direct flights with stopovers could also be banned. For the moment, as Poulomi first reported, there's going to be no change. Those non-direct flights between India and China will continue for the moment. But remember, this is a fast developing situation, and that obviously could change if there is an update from China. Poulomi, continue to stay with me. I'm also joined live now by perhaps the most prominent public personality who's gone on the record demanding an immediate clampdown on flights that originate from India and end up in China and vice versa. A flight ban is what Manish Tiwari, senior Congress leader, Lok Sabha MP, is asking for. Mr. Tiwari, pleasure to see you. Thank you for being with me on my show. Straight off, I'll ask you, sir, why are you asking for this flight ban at this time?
Well, good evening, Shiv. First of all, thank you for having me on your show. It's always a pleasure being with someone as erudite as you. Whatever visuals are coming out of China, they seem to suggest that the virus is ripping through Chinese society.
Yeah.
Their health system seems to be overwhelmed. Their hospital seems to be overstretched. Ostensibly, international newspapers are reporting that their mortuaries are overflowing. So obviously, this is a cause of concern. And if you juxtapose it with the spike in the United States of America, Japan, South Korea, and even Brazil, which are really diverse geographies, it obviously goes to show that it is not over till it is finally over. And so therefore, COVID seems to be back. And if this is a new variant, and a new variant which, God forbid, is more infectious, if not lethal, then I think as a first step, the government must ban all travel to and fro from China. I'm given to understand that perhaps there are no direct flights between India and China currently. But obviously, there's a lot of traffic through Hong Kong and through various other destinations.
Yes.
So government should take a considered call. Because we saw what happened in the March, April of 2021, when the second wave just completely devastated and overwhelmed us.
Indeed. And Mr. Tiwari, you're right. India doesn't have any current direct flights with China. It hasn't had them since late 2019, early 2020. Do you think a decision as far as banning flights needs to be taken with some urgency, not with the same sort of criteria that perhaps were applied in 2019? Now we know a lot more.
Look, we share a common border with China, and the virus respects no boundaries at all.
Yeah.
And if you were to rewind back to the March of 2020, the reason why Europe got devastated is because there were very, very strong trade linkages between Milan, where the leather industry or the high fashion leather industry is based, and China, where the manufacturing was taking place. And one of the criticisms of the Trump presidency was that he took a very, very long time to ban flights coming in from China. So I think we should learn from the experience of the past 2 years and not wait for a spike in cases. Because as we realize to our own peril, you can get overwhelmed very, very quickly before you can say Jack Robinson.
Very true.
And
Like
there's
what's happening
case
in China.
point, Shiv, which has been intriguing me. Well, China claimed that they have almost 100% immunization of their population. In fact, one of the first vaccines which came out was a Chinese vaccine.
Yes.
And so therefore, if this is what is happening, notwithstanding the vaccine, it raises questions about the efficaciousness of the vaccine also, because a large number of epidemiologists have been saying that this is like the flu shot in the US, which you need to take periodically every 4 months or something. So I think what the Chinese pandemic is doing is raising a lot of questions and concerns and queries, which I don't think should be swept under the carpet.
I entirely agree with you, I have to say, Mr. Tiwari. But, you know, China has been very, very rigid with how it has responded to flight schedules. You know, they've banned entire flight routes if, you know, even a single passenger on a single flight was found to be COVID positive. That was part of their extremely draconian zero COVID policy, for which they're paying a very, very heavy price right now, and paying an even more heavy price in the next few weeks and months, according to some experts. But do you think India should similarly be a little ruthless right now as far as taking a decision on banning flights is concerned, given that this is a situation where not only do we know a lot more, but this is the same country that hid all those facts from us earlier?
Well, China is a totalitarian state, you know, so therefore they experimented with a zero COVID policy after being less than transparent with the initial outbreak in Wuhan in the December-January of 2019 and 2020. But look where they are currently. Obviously, neither has the lockdowns, the draconian lockdowns worked, nor their immunization program seems to have worked. There seems to be something horribly going wrong out there. And so at the least, passengers, let's say, who are originating from China and transiting to India through other destinations, you possibly need to screen them. You possibly need to ensure that mandatory COVID testing is done. Maybe the Air Suvidha protocols need to be brought back again, for the simple reason that if you go by some of the modeling which is available in the public space, the projections are that this particular variant or this particular spike in COVID is going to impact 10% of the Earth's human population, you know, which is close to about 1.8 billion people.
One final question, sir. You know, and we've just reported on a survey that's been done by a polling agency, which says that 7 in 10 people in country, or 8 in 10 people in the country who were surveyed, want this flight ban to happen as quickly as possible. Of course, there may be an emotional element to it, given what India faced thanks to China in the pandemic. But there's also a sense that, look, we need to take forward the lessons that we learned over 2 years ago. Mr. Tiwari, my final question to you: is what is happening in China right now not also an indictment of the World Health Organization, which went out on a limb to try and portray, a scenario of nothing being too extreme, nothing being too wrong? They were practically a puppet of China.
Well, it's an indictment of the United Nations system, for the simple reason that you had a once-in-a-century pandemic. And when the pandemic hit or was beginning to spike in the March of 2020, China held the chair of the UN Security Council. There, China did not even permit a discussion on the pandemic when a global response was called for. And you had to wait for the Dominican Republic to assume the presidency to even have a discussion in the United Nations Security Council. And the World Health Organization, the less said, the better, because the initial advisories which came out from the World Health Organization that saying everything is all right, there's no need to disrupt any flights, life should go on as normal, actually proved to be extremely disastrous for the rest of the world. So therefore, if there is anything that we need to relook and reform, it is the United Nations system, which has completely and absolutely failed to craft a global response to this once-in-a-century pandemic.
Manish Tiwari, thank you very much for your time, and also thank you for speaking out, because personally I agree. I think a flight ban should be the least as far as India's response is concerned at this point of time. Non-direct flights, compulsory quarantine for people who've traveled over the last couple of weeks are all things that many people who've been surveyed want at this point of time. India doesn't want to take any chances. This is a country with which India shares absolutely zero trust at this point of time, and we share that sentiment with every other country. That was Manish Tiwari. We've got some more breaking news coming in now. A very, very common question right now, even I had this question before my show, is about the COVID variant that is driving the big COVID surge in China right now. You're wondering what variant of the coronavirus is this? Well, here's some news for you. That variant is already here in India. The Chinese COVID variant is already present in India. It's called the BF7. COVID variant BF7 samples have been already found in Gujarat. The BF7 COVID variant is the one that is dominating the current runaway surge that's taking place in China. So it's called the BF7. Prepare to hear that word very, very often. Gopi Maniar joining me live from Ahmedabad. Gopi, China में जो अभी कोविड का जो सर्ज हो रहा है, उसमें जो वेरिएंट जो उपस्थित है वहां पर वो है BF7 और ये वेरिएंट ऑलरेडी गुजरात में आ गया है. क्या डिटेल्स है हमारे पास गोपी?
बिल्कुल, देखिए शिव, BF7 वेरिएंट जो है उसका 2 केस पॉजिटिव पाए गए हैं, जिसमें से एक केस वडोदरा की एक NRI महिला का है जिसका रिपोर्ट पॉजिटिव आया है. उसको जीनोम सीक्वेंसिंग के लिए भेजा गया था और जीनोम सीक्वेंसिंग में ये पाया गया कि ये जो महिला NRI महिला है जो वडोदरा आई हुई है, उसका BF7 जो वेरिएंट है कोविड का, ये वेरिएंट पॉजिटिव आया है. उसके बाद उसको ट्रेस किया गया और जिस तरीके से जो गाइडलाइन जारी की गई थी कोविड को लेकर, इसी तरीके से उनके संपर्क में आने वाले जो 2 और लोग थे, उन लोगों को भी किसी तरीके की हेल्थ की दिक्कतें हुई. तो अब उन दोनों का जो कॉन्टेक्ट ट्रेसिंग है वो भी किया जा रहा है. उनके भी टेस्ट जो है वो भेजे गए हैं जीनोम सीक्वेंसिंग के लिए. साथ ही अहमदाबाद में एक जो मेल है उनका भी कोविड पॉजिटिव आया था, तो उनका भी जब जीनोम सीक्वेंसिंग के लिए भेजा गया तो BF7 उनके अंदर भी पाया गया है. तो फिलहाल 2 केसेस गुजरात के अंदर कंफर्म हुए हैं BF7 के. आज ही गुजरात सरकार के जरिए एक मीटिंग बुलाई गई. इमरजेंसी में किस तरीके से कोविड का सामना किया जा सके उसको लेकर एक प्लानिंग स्ट्रेटेजी के साथ ये मीटिंग बुलाई गई थी.
Gopi Maniar, thank you very much for joining us with that crucial update. 2 cases, confirmed cases of the BF7 variant, which is the new variant that is surging in China's current COVID crisis, is already here in India. 2 confirmed cases in Gujarat, all being monitored by the Gujarat government. Now, remember that amidst all these COVID fears, the government at the center has written to Congress MP Rahul Gandhi asking him to ensure that COVID norms are being followed in his Bharat Jodo Yatra. Well, this was supposed to be a health advisory, but it has taken an angry political color because the Congress has hit back saying why the rules only applied to the Bharat Jodo Yatra when it is on, and why no action when Prime Minister Modi and top BJP netas held massive rallies just days ago during the Gujarat campaign. Take a look at this report. It's become fully political, and that's Advantage Virus.
COVID emergency in China triggers an alert in India. In the middle of this, the centre has sparked off a political firestorm. Union Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia has shot off a letter to Congress MP Rahul Gandhi to follow COVID-appropriate measures. Mandavia quotes a letter from 3 Rajasthan BJP MPs PP Chaudhary, Nihal Chand and Deviji Patel, claiming COVID is spreading in the state because of the Yatra. The Health Minister has requested the Congress to ensure all Yatris wear masks and use sanitizers. The government has suggested only vaccinated people be allowed to take part in the Yatra. The letter further adds that the Yatra be put off if adherence to norms cannot be ensured.
मैं भारत सरकार का हेल्थ मिनिस्टर होने के नाते
मेरा दायित्व है कि देश में कोविड ना फैले, देश के सभी नागरिक स्वस्थ रहे, लेकिन कोई खास फैमिली के प्रोटेक्शन में आके एक देश के हेल्थ मिनिस्टर अपना दायित्व अदा करता हो, कोविड प्रोटोकॉल का पालन करके कोविड ना फैले उसके लिए कोई मार्गदर्शक सूचना जारी करे, तो उसके खिलाफ भी प्रश्न उठाना मैं मानता हूं कि ये मेरे कर्तव्य निर्वहन करने के लिए बाधा रूप है।
The letter did not go down well with the Congress, which asked the health minister why he is silent on rallies being held by the BJP.
इस तरह की राजनीति इन्हें नहीं करनी चाहिए। चिट्ठी लिख रहे हो, सबके लिए लिखो। यात्रा वो भी अगर नहीं निकलनी चाहिए, जन आक्रोश यात्रा, अगर भारत जोड़ो यात्रा नहीं निकलनी चाहिए तो भाजपा मान ले कि उनकी जन आक्रोश यात्रा या उनकी किसी भी यात्रा में भीड़ नहीं आ रही, इसलिए उन पर ये लागू नहीं होती चिट्ठी। सिर्फ हम पर इसलिए लागू होती क्योंकि हमारे यहाँ भीड़ बहुत आ रही है। हाँ, हम मानते हैं भीड़ बहुत आ रही है, इसमें कोई शक की बात नहीं है। लोगों का रिस्पांस बहुत जबरदस्त है पूरे भारत में भारत जोड़ो यात्रा पर, लेकिन नियम सबके लिए एक रहने चाहिए, यह सरकार को समझ लेना चाहिए।
अगर कोई और समझदार पार्टी होती विपक्ष की, जिसको जिम्मेदारी का एहसास होता, तो ये कहती आपके सुझाव के लिए धन्यवाद और इस सुझाव का पालन होगा। लेकिन हमें नहीं भूलना चाहिए, ये वो पार्टी है कांग्रेस जो कोविड को मोविड बुलाती है।
The Congress claimed the BJP is scared of Rahul's popularity and is trying to derail the yatra. The BJP rubbished the charge.
ये डर के मारे, ये आम लोगों की निगाह भटकाने के लिए बौखलाए हुए बीजेपी पार्टी ये तरह तरह की सारे सवाल उठा रहे हैं। बीजेपी पार्टी को ये कहना चाहता हूँ, गुजरात में जब चुनाव हुई थी, मोदी जी घर घर गए थे, क्या मास्क लगा के, क्या लोगों को सारे प्रोटोकॉल मानते हुए गए थे?
सवाल ये खड़ा होता है, क्या एक परिवार सब प्रोटोकॉल से ऊपर है? ये तो मैं मान सकता हूं कि आज भी गांधी परिवार में कांग्रेस के राष्ट्रीय अध्यक्ष को ज़्यादा एक परिवार को मान्यता मिलती है, लेकिन देश का प्रोटोकॉल, कोविड का प्रोटोकॉल तो उनको फॉलो करना पड़ेगा।
The centre's letter to the Congress comes at a time when all restrictions are lifted. Air, road and train traffic have reached pre-pandemic level. So the question arises, is the government considering bringing earlier travel curbs back? If not, then is the Bharat Jodo Yatra being singled out as the Congress alleges? With Paulami Saha in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
China is reeling under COVID like never before. In 2.5 years since the COVID pandemic began, this is the worst that China has experienced. Let's take you through some of the top images that are coming out via social media, via whistleblowers and others. Remember, this is despite huge media clampdowns in that country. China is facing an extraordinary wave of deaths as COVID is said to be ripping through the country. In this video on your screens, you can see how bodies have been piled up at crematoriums. These are images, remember, where we're crediting the whistleblower blogger who's been putting them out. These visuals have been going viral. And it's not just the morgues, even hospitals have been flooded with patients and bodies all across the country. Hallways are full, bodies covered in wrapper, in some cases with paper as well, have been found on video. The least we can say is that Chinese hospitals are overwhelmed with patients. Researchers are predicting that the current surge could lead to more than 1 million fatalities of citizens in China. Understandably, there's huge panic in the public in that country. Authorities have ordered huge crackdowns on citizens in different parts of the country. Videos of such collisions are emerging. People have been caged inside buildings in some areas, desperate to go out. all of this now for the world to see. Remember, test centers are also being swamped with people trying to get tested. Experts say over 60% of the Chinese population may already be infected with this new COVID variant called BF7 that we've just told you has already arrived in India. As we hope that China doesn't have to see anything worse than they're seeing at this point of time and things normalize as quickly as possible for the sake of the Chinese people. On the other side, we're putting our spotlight on the story that matters to you and I, viewer, as Indian citizens. Does this Chinese surge pose a threat to us here in India? Is it going to bring back the nightmare of 2.5 years ago, all of those things that changed our lives? Dr. Randeep Guleria, former director of AIIMS, will be with me live. Remember, he was one of the big faces of India's COVID fight back. He joins me live in one of his first interviews in many months.
Record-smashing viewership. India Today's double engine had everyone hooked.
We have the most accurate pollster with us. The only pollster picked it absolutely bang on.
Top election team, on ground and in studio. Number 1 on counting day with Tata Play. And highest average concurrent users on YouTube.
The chairman of Pakistan's ruling political party and the country's foreign affairs minister, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, bragging about the killing of global terrorist Osama bin Laden by a foreign force in his own backyard. Just like all his predecessors, Bilawal too concealed the dark reality of terrorist leaders of globally sanctioned outfits like Jaish-e-Mohammed, still being nurtured under protection of his government. An undercover investigation by India Today now reveals that the group responsible for several terror attacks in India, including the hijacking of Indian Airlines plane in 1999, the 2001 attack on the Indian Parliament, and the Pathankot attack of 2016, has now renewed its annual fund collection drive, seeking to build hundreds of new mosques all over Pakistan.
अपना घर यानी तामीर मसाजिद 313 मसाजिद का तामीरी मंसूबा फी मस्जिद तखमीना 1 करोड़ रुपए.
What you just heard is an open call for donations by the supposedly banned terror outfit in Pakistan, right under the nose of Bilawal Bhutto's government. This comes weeks after the country exited the grey list of the global terror finance watchdog, the Financial Action Task Force. Working with experts, India Today was able to infiltrate the WhatsApp groups Jaish-e-Mohammed operatives have been using. We also managed to speak to one of the operatives from Peshawar, tasked with responsibility of collecting funds. The Jaish-e-Mohammed operative provided details of an account number with Mizan Bank, Pakistan's prominent Islamic bank that offers a range of Sharia-compliant banking services. The terror operative provided us multimedia outlaying unclad details of the mega Jaish fundraiser. According to the details provided by Jaish-e-Mohammed, the banned terror outfit has set out a target of raising 1 crore Pakistani rupees for building each mosque, 16,000 rupees for a prayer carpet, and 1,800 rupees per square feet as general budget. For many years, Jaish-e-Mohammed has been carrying out mosque construction drives to collect funds for its terror activities. But now, with the threat of blacklisting from FATF withdrawn and blessings of the Pakistani leadership, the homegrown terror industry is truly blossoming in Pakistan. India has been calling Pakistan out at all global stages. But there are no signs of change from the harbourers of Osama, guardians of Hafiz and patrons of Masood Azhar. In New Delhi, with Arvind Ojha and Ankit Kumar, Bureau Report, India Today.
Amber Heard took to social media and announced that she has reached a settlement in the multi-million-dollar defamation case filed against her ex-husband and actor Johnny Depp.
Nothing less than everything.
But I now, as I stand here today, can't have a career.
Heard called the decision to settle with Depp very difficult, adding that it followed a great deal of deliberation. She wrote, and we quote, "It's important for me to say that I never chose this. I defended my truth, and in doing so, my life as I knew it was destroyed. The vilification I have faced on social media is an amplified version of the ways in which women re-victimized when they come forward." In her statement, Heard framed the settlement as a last resort, characterizing it as an opportunity to emancipate myself from something I attempted to leave over 6 years ago and on terms I can agree to. I have made no admission. This is not an act of concession. There are no restrictions or gags with respect to my voice moving forward. The Aquaman actor had appealed the $10 million defamation verdict in the Virginia court. Later, Johnny Depp also filed his own appeal. Major national feminist organizations like National Women's Law Center, Feminist Majority, Esperanza United, Women's March Foundation, National Organization for Women, came to Heard's defense and denounced online harassment, intimidation of women who report abuse. The settlement comes months after a week-long televised trial, with the jury finding out that Heard defamed Depp by writing a 2018 op for the Washington Post in which she said she became a public figure representing domestic abuse. Although the essay never mentioned Depp by name, his attorneys said it indirectly referred to allegations she made against him after she filed for divorce in 2016. The former couple's divorce was finalized in 2017. Entertainment Bureau, India Today.
Viewer, here on India Today, you always expect real experts, real wisdom, real information and real data. The reason why we've dedicated an entire edition of 5 Live today to the COVID crisis is because of what we learned 2.5 years ago when China obfuscated all facts. Now we do not trust China, and therefore we need to be doubly, triply, quadruply prepared for what could possibly happen as a spin-off effect of the COVID crisis that's happening there. And remember, one of the most prominent, credible faces during the entire COVID pandemic here in India was Dr. Randeep Guleria, who was at the time director of the prestigious All India Institute of Medical Sciences. He was one of the government's soldiers, as it were, in India's big and in many ways successful fight back against COVID. There have been issues that India needed to tide over, but in many ways India has stood up as a model for the rest of the world. Our health editor Sneha is with me as well. She and her team have been breaking every single story as far as COVID-19 is concerned, and that's the reason why India Today continues to be the most watched channel on this issue. Dr. Guleria, really good to see you in your in your post-retirement avatar, but you're back on the forefront of healthcare in India, and that's the reason why we welcome you onto India Today. We're going to go to Dr. Guleria in just a moment. Before that, here's a report that Sneha brings us today. 3 years on, the novel coronavirus, not novel anymore, is still alive, kicking and causing untold mayhem in the China that birthed the virus. It's seeing the worst crisis in 3 years. Neighbor India is not taking any chances. And today, our Health Bureau analyzes the situation with hard facts. Take a look.
The fear of a possible return of the coronavirus has now got India on a high alert mode. Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia held a high-level meeting to assess the India situation vis-a-vis China and said that COVID is not over yet. The worry? The infectious BF.7 that has been in circulation in China and has surfaced in India as well.
BF.7, the variant that is causing shockwaves in China, already exists in India. In fact, it was spotted as early as in the month of September this year, and 3 times in total. But what the government is focusing now is on bringing back the mask mandates in the country. States will be asked to do so, and also looking at an uptick on the precautionary dose.
India is not looking at imposition of restrictions, but has asked for going back to the basics.
आप जब क्राउडेड प्लेस में हैं, अंदर या बाहर, तो आप मास्क करिए, और जो व्यक्ति उम्र में बड़े हैं या को मोबिलिटीज हैं, उनको तो ये ज़्यादा इसका इस्तेमाल करना चाहिए.
Experts say that surfacing of new variants and infectious sublineages need closer monitoring and sequencing. India has been lax on this front. The Health Ministry has also written to states asking them to ramp up sequencing.
Genome sequencing, on the other hand, is to send these samples to a specialized research laboratory that will look at the genetic makeup of this virus. Thus, they will be able to tell if new mutations have come or if the existing variants have changed.
The government of India is also now stressing on the need to improve the uptake of boosters, saying that the uptake of boosters is just about 28%, which actually is fairly dismal. Very recently, the Serum Institute of India also spoke about the fact that it had to discard many COVID-19 vaccine doses because there is just no demand.
Particularly जो हमारे citizens, senior citizens हैं, वो कोई छूट गए हैं precaution dose से, तो हमेशा की तरह जैसे हम पहले भी अपील करते थे कि उनका हमें ज्यादा ख्याल करना है. सीनियर सिटीजन्स क्योंकि वल्नरेबल हैं और बीमारी वाले व्यक्ति वल्नरेबल ज्यादा होते हैं.
What the actual virus currently circulating is, whether it is a previously confined ancestral virus or a Delta variant, or is it from the Omicron family of variants which are currently the dominant viruses in the world for COVID. Based on that, we'll have to judge what the likely dangers are to both to China and to the rest of the world.
While China's situation is different from India and the rest of the world, the China crisis shows us that this virus that has the potential to cripple the world is alive and kicking even 3 years after it first raised its ugly head. With Milan Sharma in New Delhi, Sneha Mordani for India Today.
Now, here are just 5 basic questions that every Indian is probably asking right now. And I'm going to try and answer them to the best of the information that we have so far. Remember, the one thing that COVID has taught us is that everything is evolving. Number one, does the China COVID surge threaten us here in India? It's possible infections could surge. Remember, already 2 cases of the BF7 variant that's crushing China have already been identified here in India. Number 2, what is the Indian government doing at this point of time? They're identifying new variants, asking for protocols to return at this point of time. Question number 3, could India see another COVID wave potentially? There is a possibility of this because an increase in cases is almost definitely to be expected. Whether it becomes a wave is yet to be seen. Do you need to take another booster dose of your vaccine? Not yet, as far as the government is concerned. No specific instruction as far as an additional booster shot is concerned. And finally, question number 5, could restrictions or even a lockdown return to daily life? Mandatory mask, mandatory social distancing and things like that, only if severity of infections increase. I repeat, at this point of time, there is no reason to believe it will happen, but it's best to stay prepared because we're dealing with a crisis in a country where we can't even depend on authentic information. Let's go straight to Dr. Randeep Guleria for our first question. Dr. Guleria, is a surge in India expected as well, given what we're seeing happening in China right now? There are already 2 cases of BF7 that have been identified here in India. Do you think there will be a surge in India as well, like it is in China, sir?
So like you rightly said, this sublineage of Omicron has already been seen in India in October, which is being reported from China. The situation in China and India is quite different. In China, because of the zero COVID policy, there is a large number of people in China who are sort of naive or are not being exposed to the virus. Also, the vaccine uptake in the elderly and high-risk group is low, and we don't know about the efficacy of the vaccine. The situation in India is different. We've had a good vaccine uptake, even our booster dose has been given, and we have data that the vaccine is effective against the new variants. Also, a lot of people have got natural infection, so there is also immunity because of natural infection. And because of the fact that our population is protected from all of this, the chances of the new variant causing a severe illness and more hospitalization or deaths in our country seems to be less likely. But having said that, we need to be more vigilant because we know as cases increase in a particular area, the chances of mutation and new mutants coming up also becomes more. Therefore, good surveillance for any cluster of cases, any increased hospitalization in our country needs to be done, and very aggressive genome sequencing so that we pick up the variant early and are able to link it with any clinical or epidemiological change which we see in the pattern. Currently, India is in a good position, but I don't think we just need to rest. We need to be prepared for any situation which may arise.
Dr. Guleria, the Government of India held a high-level meeting today. Various things were discussed. What should the government do right now in terms of the kind of advice that goes out to people? What should be the next few steps in the next few days or weeks to come?
So I think, as has been already said by the government, there needs to be more of testing. We need to encourage people to come forward and get themselves tested. Many individuals who have classical COVID symptoms don't get themselves tested. So they should get themselves tested because then only will we know if they're positive and we can do genome sequencing if we have a proper sample. You can't do genome sequencing if you do the rapid antigen test. You need to do an RT-PCR test to be able to do genome sequencing. So people should come forward and get the RT-PCR test done. Also, we have to have surveillance, which is sentinel surveillance in hospitals. So if there is increase in hospital admissions or ICU admissions with flu-like symptoms or viral pneumonia, then that should be a red flag so that people know that there is something happening and genome sequencing of all these samples should be done. So Sentinel's surveillance may also be very useful. And I would say physicians and healthcare workers should be alert that if a cluster of cases happens in any part, then that should be immediately reported. Large-scale testing should be done there so that we're able to identify any new variant in that area, and we're able to link that with the clinical and epidemiological profile of what is happening there, and then take measures to control the spread.
You know, Dr. Guleria, most people, I would hazard to say, even as recently as yesterday, were wondering whether they were ever going to see headlines or news about COVID ever again. And now there's blanket coverage, led by Sneha's team of this COVID crisis here in India. And many people are wondering, the outbreak that's happened in China reminds us of something we never wanted to think of again. But many are now asking if there will be a replication here, sir.
Correct. So there are two parts of this. One is when the outbreak happened in China in December of 1919 and then went on to 2020 and then spread to Italy and subsequently to other parts of the world, we as a population had never been exposed to the coronavirus COVID-19, and therefore our immune system was not at all prepared or tuned to fight this infection. We have come a long way since from there. We are now in a better situation because of vaccination, because of previous immunity, due to the getting infection, and therefore our body is able to fight the infection better. But the virus also is clever. The virus develops immune escape mechanism and it's becoming more good at that. But it's causing more infection, but not severe infection. So we will see cases which will not go away. COVID is going to be here to stay, and we will continue to see infection. But that is quite all right if it's just a flu-like syndrome, rather than having severe pneumonia like we saw last year when the Delta variant was there. Currently, the Omicron lineage is a milder form, and the sublineages don't seem to be causing severe pneumonia, especially in those who have been vaccinated and protected because of previous infection. So unlike China, because of vaccination and previous infection, we are now having a good degree of immunity, both as a population or what we could call as herd immunity, and therefore the chances of us getting severe infection is less. Yes, we will have cases of COVID. There will be some who will require hospitalization and have severe illness, but that will be much lower than what we were seeing last year.
Dr. Guleria, everyone wants to know, I think that's the most commonly asked question is, what should we do? Should we now, from tomorrow onwards, just start wearing the mask? I mean, at the end of the day, the government has held this meeting after months together. Also, we have the upcoming festive season, so social distancing norms, should that be looked into right away?
So I would really say that those who are at high risk, the elderly and those who are having comorbidities, should be extra careful. I would still advise people to wear masks because that's a good measure not only from COVID point of view, but from other viral infections, including influenza and tuberculosis. And in areas where air pollution is high, the mask also prevents or protects you against air pollution. So it's a good thing to do. And also I would say that if possible, try and avoid crowded places, especially during the winter months, because you tend to stay more indoor, and if the ventilation is not good enough, then a lot of viral infections tend to spread, and you can get influenza and COVID-19 because of that. So precautions during winter months are important, and we must continue with that because all prevention is always better than cure.
Now, the Indian public, Dr. Guleria, is going to be very upset hearing that from you because, like Sneha said, it's the festive season, it's Shadi season everywhere in the country. So, I'm going to repeat that question. Are you saying that, big gatherings should be avoided at this time?
So currently our situation is good. We are not seeing increased hospitalization or deaths. So I don't think that I would say that we should go back to what we were doing last year in terms of total ban in all these activities. But like I said, the high risk group, if possible, should avoid crowded places where chance of infection is high. And even if they go to these places, they should wear a mask, and hand washing should also be done. But a total ban on such activities, I don't think is warranted currently. We are not seeing that type of cases in our country. We need to be vigilant. We need to take precautions, but we don't need to have a panic situation.
Dr. Guleria, always a pleasure hearing a sober voice, full of information and advice from someone like you. It's good to see you back. I wish it were in better circumstances, but here we are on, the potential foothills of another COVID crisis here in India. We will not scare people here. We will only have people like Dr. Guleria and Sneha on here to give you the information that you need in a timely fashion. Dr. Guleria, a pleasure. Thank you very much for being with me. And Sneha, I was hoping that things like hand wash and quarantine and social distancing and masks were words that could have been cast out of our lexicon. Sadly, that is not the case, and we have only China to thank. Remember, Sneha and her team will continue to track the story very closely. We will bring you updates on a daily basis. That's a promise. That's it on 5 Live. Thanks so much for watching. Coming up next, from COVID to circus, the star cast of the upcoming film Circus joined Akshita for an absolutely unmissable, rip-roaring Ranveer Fest in Mumbai. That whole thing, unedited, unmissable, comes up next.
को बोलते हैं self-respect.
Months before assembly polls, serious discontent coming out in the Karnataka BJP. Firebrand MLA Ishwarappa targeting the Bommai government, questioning his omission from the state cabinet despite getting a clean chit in the contractor's suicide case. Ishwarappa, who stayed away from the ongoing assembly session, asserted that he's unhappy with the BJP for ignoring his rightful demand.
Very shameful for me. That is why I requested the Chief Minister before Gujarat election. He said after Gujarat election you may induct in the cabinet. But so far they were not inducted.
Ishwarappa, the influential MLA from Shivamogga and a prominent leader from the backward Kuruba community, also made a point by meeting BJP MLA Ramesh Jarkiholi, who had also lost his ministership over a sleaze video.
Yesterday we met. I gone to the airport and he also came there. In this airport chamber only we met, that is all. There is no politics discussion, nothing.
Chief Minister Basavaraj Bommai backed the inclusion of both leaders in his cabinet, saying he has taken up the matter with the BJP High Command.
ಅವರ ವಿಚಾರವನ್ನು ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ನಾನು ಮೊನ್ನೆ ದಿಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಹೋದಾಗ ಪ್ರಸ್ತಾವನೆಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಅವರು ಕೂಡ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸಕಾರಾತ್ಮಕವಾಗಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮಿಕ್ಕಂಥ ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನು ನಾನು ವೈಯಕ್ತಿಕವಾಗಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಹೇಳಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಿರಂಗ ಹೇಳಕ್ಕಾಗಲ್ಲ. ಆ ವಿಷಯ ಪ್ರಸ್ತಾಪ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಇಷ್ಟು ಮಾತ್ರ ಹೇಳಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ. ಮತ್ತು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ಸಕಾರಾತ್ಮಕ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಕೆಲವು ವಿಚಾರಗಳನ್ನು ನಾನು ಈಶ್ವರಪ್ಪ ಹತ್ರ, ರಮೇಶ್ ಹತ್ರ ಸಂಪರ್ಕದಲ್ಲಿದ್ದೀನಿ, ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀನಿ.
After the outreach by the BJP, Ishwarappa appeared